Hi there, and welcome to the latest interview as part of our Digital Transformation Festival on the Drum. We're going right through until the end of April with this series, but all the sessions will be available on the Drum website. And during the festival, we're going to be looking at the digital innovation that's taking place across businesses and also within advertising, and what's changing. Well, we're all experiencing great changes within society in order to cope with the pandemic that is overtaking the whole world. I'm Stephen Leptak, Executive Editor of The Drum, and I am joined by a stellar panel to discuss the changes that are happening within advertising right now. And I'm delighted to introduce Joe Coombs, the Chief Operating Officer of Publicis UK, Philippa Snare, Senior Vice President EMEA for the Trade Desk, and Pete Markey, Chief Marketing Officer of TSB. Thank you, the three of you, for joining me to have this discussion today. So I'm going to start with Philippa, if I could, but I'll open this to all three of you. At the moment, what role can brands play in using their advertising to help consumers and customers just get through the day-to-day right now? What role do you think that they can do to help them?
So I think the most obvious answer, but a critical one, is that they can look at what consumers are doing and look at the behaviours that are changing because of the situation that we're in today, and find a purpose that their brand can still fulfil for those consumers. So recently, Kantar did a survey and found that like 92% of consumers believe that brands should still continue advertising through the outbreak and be there for them. And we've also seen on our own platforms that more and more people are kind of consuming information in a different way. They're going and watching more TV, and they really want the brands to still be there to talk to them, and they want the brands to represent something for them that's meaningful to society and that's helping them. And so I think, I don't know, that like in the past, like Toyota in the 70s continued to spend through a really tough time and surpassed VW as the main imported car maker in the US. And they did that because instead of making short-term decisions around like kind of their marketing, they said, no, we're in here in the long term, and we're going to use this to make sure that we're here for our customers. And I think there's other examples, like in the 90s, Pizza Hut did that and overtook McDonald's because they just continued to market through a really difficult period, but be there and relevant to their customers. So for me, it's about looking at what the behaviour is and then matching that behaviour with something that the brands can help consumers with.
Thanks, Pete. What's your view on that?
I'd agree. I mean, I think at the moment, it's a really important time to listen more than ever as brands and brand owners. I think we've got to be having regular research programs, tuning into social media, so listening to not only what our customers are saying and feeling, but also, I guess, the nation as a whole. Because there's a real danger, I think, as brands that we are zigging when customers are zagging. We've got to really be in tune with what people are feeling, and on top of that, make sure our communications work well within that environment. I guess, for us as a bank, we've got a really important role to play every day with how people look after their money. So our role has been to be very proactive, to make sure branches are open because we're treated as essential workers, to make sure our call centres are still operating, and to make sure we put additional levels of cover and support in place for customers. And then on Philippa's point, make sure we communicate that. It's not just enough to do it. People need to know about it, and that can be through everyday communications, but also, we're launching some new adverts this Saturday, specifically aimed to do that, specifically aimed to get across a message of how we're here to help and to give customers a message of calm and reassurance in a moment that is quite uncertain and quite unprecedented. So I think communication right now, and perhaps over-communication for brands, is really key.
And Joe, if you and your special guest want to pick up that question.
Hi, yes, sorry. My special guest is 6 years old and she's called Olive, and she's has lots of opinions on working from home at the moment. But to pick up, just kind of like, wrap up maybe what Philippa and Pete were saying. I think in uncertain times like this, people are drawn to three types of needs. You've got at a social level, we kind of look to the safety of the group. At a behavioural level, I think we look to survive. And then within that survival need is then looking for opportunities and advantage. And then at a community level, I think we're looking for leadership. So, and given that advertising is all about communication, I think there's roles that brands and advertising businesses can play at all three of those levels. To the point that Pete was making earlier, just now actually, about the work that TSB is about to come out with, BT are looking to do the same to help provide sort of work at a social level that help people feel safe and in control at this in these difficult times, but then also at a leadership level, starting to give voice and demonstrate the brand as a leader that can help consumers and communities through these tough times. And I think as a brand, you have a responsibility to look to the inner strengths of your brand and what it stands for, and then to look to see whether as a brand you should be supporting at a community level, supporting at a behavioural level, or at that leadership level, and then be appropriate to your brand and your message, and support your communities in the most appropriate way.
I mean, that makes an awful lot of sense. Brands trying to take a role and actually be leaders at this time, especially when, I mean, people just don't know. They're uncertain at this time. But what's interesting to me is that how do you plan? How do you strategically, as a brand, then go, right, this is the direction we're going to go down? Because we've never experienced this collectively. So how do you make decisions and feel like they are the correct route to go down? Pete, can I begin with you?
It's a great question. I think if I look at probably the early weeks when we found ourselves in lockdown, I think for us as a brand, we had to get our house in order around organising around things that mattered and re-looking at the plans in the short term. And so the team, we really reorientated around customer need. So made sure we got all the communications out we needed to, the messages were clear, orientated a lot more of the team towards social media and content as well. And then we've actually come out of the last couple of weeks, once we've got that tighter comms plan together. And the comms plan is a really important bit, because as most brands feel, you arrive in this moment and you go, right, what do we do now? You know, with the usual stuff we can't do, we've got to do new stuff, and actually we've got to learn as we go. So those are what the early weeks look like. And we've got a very tight comms plan that links together what we do and also what our public relations and comms team do. It's an integrated plan that we update regularly. We meet and have a call every evening to go through it and make sure we're aligned. And that has really served us in really good stead over the last few weeks. But probably about 3-4 weeks ago, we started alongside that to look at, well, where do we think the plan then goes in the longer term? That's very hard to predict, isn't it, when we're going to come out of lockdown. But we're now at a point where we've actually looked at 2020 and what we believe the phases through the year will be like, and mapped our activity against what those phases could look like and then what our actions could be. But built enough flexibility in there that if lockdown continues longer or we see different trends emerge, we can shift and move things around to meet those needs at that moment. So look, it's been challenging. I think it's been tough for every brand. So we're not going to pretend any of that's been easy. But actually, it's been quite a rewarding journey to first of all meet the immediate point of need with customers, and then start to look towards longer term brand health and where the emerging situation may be in 3 to 6 months' time.
And Joe, where are the agencies supporting their clients in this respect? When they're looking for certainties, how are you able to give them those?
So I think, the number one thing is to make sure that you're working in partnership with your client, and that you have, as Pete said, you have a plan that generally is planned out for the year. Being able to adapt to that plan quickly is exactly what we're now doing with our clients. So scenario planning. Some it's about reviewing, whether it's from one of our media agencies, our comms agencies, whether it's one of our Power of One teams. We've been working very closely with the team to review and client teams which brands should be on air, what are they saying, what was planned, what's still relevant, what's not relevant. As a group, we've developed a Shop Responsibly platform, which a number of our FMCG brands and the co-op came into, to make sure that we were helping to reinforce, back to that leadership point and the kind of social community, reinforce the government messages as well, so that we're in line with them. because the last thing you want to do is be a brand that's putting out messages that are irrelevant. But then, as Pete said, I think it's a time now to try new things. It's a time to because if you don't, then it's sort of a crisis is an opportunity missed, isn't it? But there's a massive opportunity to test new things, to see how they land. It's interesting because on the one hand, you want to test and innovate when things are stable, because at least you can control it. But at the same time, right now we're seeing, and I've loved it, seeing new things coming out from brands that you think, okay, that experiment worked, that experiment didn't. Whether it's LVMH doing unbranded alcohol or whether it's Brewdog doing heavily branded, you can see consumers' reactions to that. And from that, I think you can help to see how far the brands could go and where they could stretch in the future. So my number one thing is we absolutely have been partnering with clients. How can we help? We understand the tough times, and we have been moving mountains to turn things around quickly, to create new work in different ways. And actually, a lot of the stars that we've been working with, Kevin Bacon, for example, on EE, was phenomenal at helping to shoot and come up with the new piece of creative to support the NHS with unlimited data. So we've had to be nimble, we've had to be quick. It's actually kind of one of the ways that we like working. But we have really had to help our clients and their brands make sure that what they do is appropriate to them. And the audience that they're talking to, back to my earlier point.
And Philippa, from the trade desk and your own point of view then, media has been fascinating to see how it's been affected but also reacted as well. What have you seen happening in recent weeks that have helped to try and support brands and advertisers?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm in a sense, as much as anyone can be, I'm inspired by how agile people have been and started to move. I mean, my entire career, I've been pushing and kind of supporting the digital kind of advertising journey and industry. And so now all of a sudden, people are, as Pete and Joe have said, they're being incredibly flexible. They're starting to go, okay, well, if I can't do events and I don't want, to encourage hundreds of people getting together, if I shouldn't do out of home because there's no reach and there's no football at the moment, then what do I do and how do I quickly pivot? And so kind of agile marketing is coming to fruition. Unfortunately, it's being pushed in this way, but I think brands are starting to see massive benefits from being that flexible and for trying new things. And certainly what we've seen, and I said before, we're seeing about 23% more inventory on mobile and mobile websites, and about 33% more on connected TV. And so really, really smart companies are using this time to try new things and try new channels and figure out how to use this time to invest in their dollars and put them into mediums where they can learn really quickly and they can figure out what's kind of good and what's bad. And the other thing that I'm seeing kind of from our platform, we've got an education platform called the Edge Academy. Normally that would be something that people pay for, but we've given it away for free from the trade desk, and loads of people, we've had hundreds of thousands of people kind of consuming that education content, but I know that other companies are doing the same. So I think it's a time to sharpen your skills and to kind of brush up on things that maybe you haven't had time to learn, and then there's a time to use mediums that you wouldn't normally have used to be able to test out new techniques to still be meaningful to your customers.
Yeah, that brings me on nicely to one of the core topics I wanted to focus on was how data is being used right now, because it's a time we don't know. It's very uncertain. So how can you rely on historic data to tell you what people are thinking right now? Is there any tips or anything you've seen happen there and how data can be used right now to inform?
Yeah, so I think like kind of data is still obviously incredibly important, but I think what's changed in that we've run through this journey, haven't we, of everyone thinking like, oh my God, it's all about my kind of first party data. Then we started going, oh, it's not just about your data, it's about the insights that you can glean from that data. And now certainly what I'm learning in my own career journey, having joined the trade desk recently, is I had no kind of appreciation of how quickly that data is actually informing decisions. And so brands absolutely, need to have and use their first party data, but then how they're then using that data to make split second decisions with artificial intelligence engines, and using that kind of third party and first party data together to say, okay, like, we can see that we know this is our customer. Normally they'd go into a shop. Now they're spending much more time watching, I don't know what, on Netflix. But they're quickly going to either Amazon or an online fulfillment engine still to make the same purchases. And we just need to be able to make sure that our ads are redirected to those platforms where they're going to be consuming that kind of content. That's happening in like milliseconds that I had literally no appreciation of. And so like kind of I think how we help companies be able to use that data, marry it up with third-party data, and then make decisions super quick is like kind of critical.
Yeah, and that's the point you make. How fast have decisions become? Are things moving at a much greater speed?
Well, if I can pick that up, Stephen. So I think that data. If we look across the spectrum, at one end, when we have our assets and we have our messages, then data, and as Philippa was talking about, making sure that we're serving the right message at the right time on the right channels, and then being able, as Philippa said, in milliseconds, create new assets, serve them to the right people at the right time. That's really valuable. And I think that we're starting, some organizations are ahead of others, but I genuinely believe that we're getting there now. There's lots of providers and different tools to enable brands to be able to take advantage at that end of the scale. And I think where Philippa was talking as well about the other end of the scale, the sort of insight place, I think what we're still seeing, and so the speed at that end is really important. But at this end, what we're seeing is we've got lots of data, but it's not telling us why. And data's never going to be able to tell us why people do things. It tells us what they do, it tells us how they do it, it tells us when they do it, but it doesn't tell us necessarily why we do it. And that's when I think that for me, the marriage of human intelligence with artificial intelligence and data is really important, because without the two of those, two of them working together, we'll never understand why. And I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a process that should ever be real time. I think it's a process that takes some time and some thinking, but it is the science and the art coming together, which is beautiful. And so I kind of look at data end to end in terms of this end, it's working with humans to help us understand why. At this end, it can be much more about powering the machine so that we can focus our time and effort on the upfront bit to make sure that what we're creating is better further down the line, if you see what I mean. So one area is about speed, the other area is actually about helping us be smarter, but we can't do that without human intervention.
So Pete, from the last few weeks then, what have been the data sets that you've been looking for, or the insights that have been different to what you would be normally asking for?
So we've been doing a mix of things, but we start off by doing specific bits of research. So we've been tapping into existing surveys and added some additional questions. So we've been able to really tap into what consumers and probably more importantly, our customers are feeling right now and why. So we have a sense of generally how they're feeling about what we're doing, about banks in general, but also importantly, what's going on in their lives. I think it taps into something Joe was saying about this sort of human intelligence is, I think it's so important that you understand not your brand and your business in a bubble. There's so much going on in people's lives right now. We are part of that, but we're not everything in people's lives. So it's been really important to listen and understand what's going on, the role we play, the role people feel we should play, and what we should do. And then social media, I appreciate, it doesn't represent everyone in the UK, but it's been an invaluable tool, particularly through social listening on Twitter, to just tap into conversations and nuances of conversations. Not just what people are asking us, what people are asking competitors, what people are asking generally about money and finance at the moment. And the work we're putting out towards the end of the week and the activity we put out over the last 4 or 5 weeks has really aimed to reflect things people are worried about. So a really good example is fraud. Actually, fraud cases have gone up in financial services. Scammers and fraudsters have made a lot of money from very vulnerable people. And we've been at the forefront of trying to tackle that, both with the advice we've been given, but also we have a fraud refund guarantee. So if anyone is conned and it's not their fault, we will refund them automatically. We're the only bank that does that. And so it's been great at being able to get that message out and talk to people more, as well as giving them tips on fraud, because we identified early on that fraud was a real worry point. There are many other worry points. We've actually mapped a series of concerns people have got, and we've mapped content and information and activity directly into being able to tap in and answer those points. So, I think it's been really important rather than have something that's rudderless and throws. In any crisis, the danger is just chuck stuff out. We've avoided that. We're putting stuff out because there's a need for it and because it's answering specific questions. And then tapping into what I thought was very powerful in what Joe and Philippa were saying, actually then often finding an audience for those messages. You've got your organic reach, but actually paid for activity to get service messages out in front of your customers through, be it Facebook or other channels, has been really important for us over the last 4 or 5 weeks. How do we, in the best possible way, reach people in the media they're consuming right now? Radio has also been really important for us as well as a key channel. So we've learned a lot and we're still listening, and it's an ongoing journey.
So we're looking at, you're talking about putting an advertising campaign out this weekend, Pete, and I'm curious how you're able to marry empathy, empathetic communications, and be creative at the same time. Is quite a difficult thing to do, or is that something that TSB does naturally?
Well, one of the benefits we've got as a brand is when we look at our brand tracking, we're known as a business that's about people helping people, particularly at a local level. And that's a really good bedrock for the activity we're about to put out. And the activity you'll see involves real TSB staff in an environment communicating messages in a slightly different way. But it's done deliberately by real people giving help and support to real people, which we felt was really important at the moment. So our previous style had featured animation that's done very well for us, but we are actively moving away from that approach. And actually this moment has been the right time to shift gear into real people in an empathetic way, delivering messages to real people. And when we get our frontline people that every day are out helping people in branches or on the phones, there's a natural empathy already because they get it. They really get it. They understand what people are feeling and what they're hearing and how they're helping people every day. And I saw the edit earlier on for the ad going out Saturday. We've got a wonderful partner on that, and we call them partners in TSB, a member of staff who runs a branch in Yorkshire, and she's got 2 dogs in the ad. It oozes the empathy of the fact she does this every day. This is her job. She helps people every day. So when you put her in front of a camera, she just oozes helpfulness as well. So it's been great to see that work come together very quickly, and the guys at McCann have worked at pace on that.
And Philippa, from your point of view then, are you seeing other brands being able to be both creative and empathetic at the same time in the current situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think there's two kind of brands that are coming out for me when I look at what's coming out at the moment from a kind of different companies. There's ones that are following this this like kind of typical journey or arc where it's showing lots of pictures of skyscrapers and like empty like kind of streets and people being distant and like and then basically fulfilling their own wishes by saying we're there for you, we've been there for you for 100 years, blah blah blah. And that to me actually there's so many of them that it's becoming a little bit disingenuous, and I think people are getting kind of a bit sick of it. And then there are brands that are really not trying to push themselves in this space, but they're still trying to just say, look, this is where we can be relevant to you, or this is where we can play a place. So I I'm really excited about the TSB work because it sounds to me like, you know, and I know Pete, so he'll get the tone right. I love the work that Jo and her team have done for EE and with Kevin Bacon. I think it's perfect. It's like, you know, this is where we can play a role. I think Mercedes have also done an incredible job. They haven't actually reshot. What they've done is they've just used stills and then said, look, you know, we're still here for you. Like, we still stand for the same values. So I think there are really smart brands that are not kind of taking advantage of the situation, but are really establishing and re-establishing, like, kind of that they're really honest and they're empathetic. And then there are other brands that I think are jumping on a bandwagon and kind of letting themselves down, if I'm honest.
Jo, can I ask you about the work actually? Because I mean, this is a moment where you're thinking, great, we've got this brand ambassador, we can get him to talk to consumers straight away. But what were the insights that made EE think, yes, this is the way we're going to go? Can you talk about how that campaign happened?
Well, the first thing that I should say is that I can't take any credit for that campaign. So that's a wonderful piece of work done by one of the publicist agencies, Saatchi & Saatchi, and a long-standing relationship that they have with the client, which really genuinely is a partnership. And, you know, I would imagine that the very first thing, knowing the guys at EE, the very first thing they were looking to do was think about how they can help the key workers at this particular time. So the free data for NHS, if you'd read the press, it was a very instant no-brainer, because they were obviously all having to use their own equipment a lot of the time. And so, you know, then when you've got a problem like that and a genuine service that they can play, getting in touch with Kevin and your brand ambassador to say, hey, will you get involved with this? Wasn't the hardest sell-in job that they've ever had to do. However, putting a beautiful piece of work together, no matter how simple it is, remotely, when everybody's having to work from home, that is a difficult challenge. So I think they pulled that off brilliantly. And then I just look at the other brands. There's some beautiful work about to come out with BT and ITV together, which is public service. Back to this point around, you know, the community and taking a leadership role and how we help from a social environment perspective. None of that is about BT. All of that is about being of public service, and that's about to air now. And there's some lovely stuff from Visa as well, and Morrison's. I think, you know, some of the supermarkets have communicated really well, been very clear and open about what they're doing and why they're doing it. Morrison's have a lovely story in terms of their end-to-end supply chain, and one of the things that makes them different. And I think that's starting to come out now, which is really strong. I love what the co-op have been doing around food banks and supporting them. And then again, Visa with the high street, just reminding people that their local shops and local businesses might be closed, but you could still buy vouchers for them now online a lot. And over the phone, which in the long run will make a huge difference to our businesses. So again, I completely agree with Philippa, the sort of moody music and the empty streets to sort of capitalize on a moment, not so helpful. But those brands that have been feeling the mood and getting it right for a market or a small audience, because some of it's just been online work that's beautiful too. I think those are the brands that hopefully continue to gain consumer trust. Like Pete says, it's absolutely essential right now, and TSB is one of the, you know, very trusted brands. So again, look forward to see what's coming out from Pete soon and team.
So what do you think the lessons are that advertisers are learning right now? What do you see in the last few weeks them having taken on board that you think they will take forward the days when we are actually allowed to leave our houses again? Philippa, would you have a viewpoint on that?
Yeah, I mean, the first one that springs to mind is the conversation that people are being forced to go through around, like, kind of their event strategy, and you know, whether you need to spend a lot of money on like some of these bigger events, or whether you can you can achieve the same results. And I mean, I think this is an example, like, you know, the Drum doing webinars and engaging people with online video content, I think is like kind of a beautiful example of what a lot of companies are doing and learning from, and realizing that they're getting a lot of traction, and they're getting a lot of engagement with their key audiences. So I think it's changing the way people are seeing the advertising mix. It's changing the way they're seeing how their budgets are planned for and spent. And I think it's also changing how much value you expect to see out of each dollar that you, or pound or euro that you spend. And I think people are becoming much more, leaning much more into being experts on how that money is being spent and whether it's achieving the right outcomes or not, and much more careful. And then I think on the creative side, what I'm seeing is that people are realizing that they can repurpose and reuse creatives with just really smart wording, and they don't necessarily need to have long form content to engage people, like that you can still be meaningful and be relevant with some very simple promises. I think Coca-Cola's done it recently really well, because they're using their tagline as "staying apart is the best way to stay united." Like, you know, that's still like kind of true to the Coca-Cola brand, but they're going like, you know what, you've got a responsibility too, and we're gonna like kind of hold you to it. So I love the creativity that it's driving out of people, having to be more careful with their budgets, having to rethink how they connect with their consumers, and then having to be quite innovative in like how they create stuff, and how they circumvent a normal process that they would have otherwise followed.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing a lot of strategic plays and real smart thinking right now to overcome problems. So if ever there was a problem to overcome. Pete, can I ask you, what lessons have you learned then as an advertiser in recent weeks? Is there anything that you'll certainly be taking forward?
Yeah, I think just building on what Philip was saying, I think for me, watching both our brand and other brands, the brands you feel are winning at the moment are ones that have got a very clear sense of purpose and what they're about. I know purpose can be overused, but the brands that are winning know what they're about, and they're able to then deploy that in the right way and put customers front and center. So for me, some of the key lessons are: be absolutely clear what your purpose is about and deliver it consistently, and really be there for your customers, fulfilling that purpose right now, because the brands that do will not be forgotten for the right reason. They'll be remembered for really helping out and stepping in and making a difference. And I think often that purpose as well, stretches beyond just what you do for your immediate customers. So great examples I want to go about: Coke, Morrison's and food banks is outstanding. We're doing some work with Citizens Advice Bureau to help, again, people beyond our customers, people that have really been impacted financially by what's been going on with the current situation in lockdown. And I think it's incumbent on any brand to deliver their purpose and go beyond it. So my key learnings are actually the basics and fundamentals of marketing are true. We've always known they're true, but they're more true and more relevant in a crisis. And actually, the number of conversations I've been in the last few weeks about purpose, about brand, about reputation, about customer, are probably more than I've been involved with for many years. And that's right. So I think if we can keep those things front and center moving forwards, that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah. Joe, can I ask, what has been your major takeaway from recent weeks?
Well, I mean, the number one thing is that COVID-19 has been the digital transformation driver, right? It's like every brand or business who delayed digital transformation or said it was too difficult, the catalyst is COVID, and actually that's a huge shift for a lot of organizations, and as a result they won't go backwards, which is brilliant. So I think it has been the catalyst for digital transformation at scale, and all those things that businesses said they couldn't do, they found ways to do them in this crisis. So that's, I think, a positive that's come out of it. Obviously there are lots of negatives, but just focusing on the positives. I think the other thing as well is brands looking at different ways and different channels to market. So anybody whose digital shelf wasn't, who can sell direct to consumers, but who hadn't focused on their digital shelf, will be losing significantly now. And that's something that can very easily be fixed quite quickly coming out of this, which I think everybody needs to look at. But it also makes people explore different channels to market and think about building direct distribution models and getting around things. Whether you are a restaurant who is now looking at how they and what they provide to their local community to keep their business alive and support the community, or whether you're big business and you're a huge multinational, understanding where you can win on that digital shelf and how your business is performing, I think will be another one of the positives that comes out of this, because the brands that get that right will be the ones that succeed, and those that don't are going to have a very tough time, I think.
Well, we're coming to an end of this session, and thank you to the three of you for taking on my questions, but also for sharing what you've been saying from the last few weeks. It's been very interesting to hear your viewpoints. And thank you to you, the viewer, for joining us. Keep an eye on the Drum website. There's plenty more around digital transformation. We've been doing this for 6 weeks. So there's lots of content if you are a business that's looking to try and push forward your own digital opportunities. Thank you again to the three of you, and take care, everyone.